My name's Luke Vandermillen. I'm with the new business development team here at RPAG and Plan Fees. And today I'm really excited to talk to you about a topic that I think is really applicable across everyone that's probably going to be on this call, whether you're on the advisor side, the sales side, service side, operations, etc. It behooves us all as a firm to win and retain business going forward. One of the most common questions that I get asked when working with RPAG and Plan Fees members is, what can I utilize and what strategies and technology can I leverage through RPAG and Plan Fees to win new business and help keep my current clients happy? So today, what I wanted to go over is a couple of strategies that I've seen utilized by some of our most successful retirement advisors that are with RPAG, as well as some tips for things to look for when you're looking to win new business or keep your clients happy and retain those clients. So again, just giving you all kind of a quick roundup of what kind of sections we're going to be talking about today. The first piece I want to talk about is, what should I be looking for when I'm prospecting for new business? And what should I be looking for as red flags with one of my current plans? Then we'll talk about how to prospect and retain business through the lens of investment due diligence, fee benchmarking, and last, employee engagement. So a quick overview for those of you who might not be familiar. RPAG is a practice management platform for retirement plan specialists that's been in the industry for a few decades now. And one of the things that's really important to us here at RPAG is a holistic service model that's offered by an advisor. Traditionally in the past, the 401k advisor was looked at as more of a investment analytics expert, someone that's going to analyze the fund lineup and tell the plan sponsor if certain funds are doing bad, if we're putting them on the watch list, or if we're getting rid of them. But in the past decade plus, we've seen a real evolution from investment management consultant to retirement plan specialist becoming more of a overall business consultant. I've seen and worked with retirement advisors who get pulled into plenty of different things, whether it's executive benefits, employee engagement through individual wealth, plan governance, fiduciary education. So it's really important for us here at RPAG to not only think of us as advisors, but as consultants to help our businesses that we partner with drive to a successful future. And to us here at RPAG, that's going to come with a number of components. The first off is going to be fiduciary support. So here at RPAG, we have an in-house team of former ERISA practicing attorneys that assist all of our members with different compliance and governance related questions. A great resource to leverage if you have it in case any special circumstances come up when you're dealing with clients, whether you see a red flag with plan design or things like that. Supporting from a fiduciary standpoint is probably the most important piece of being a retirement advisor, especially as you swim up market into larger and larger plans. And then obviously we have our fee benchmarking. The DOL says that it's up to the retirement advisor on an annual basis, or it's up to the fiduciary, on an annual basis to determine fee reasonableness. And they leave it at that. They say fee reasonableness. So it's up to the advisor, the expert in the room, to take a look at the fees on an annual basis and say, hey, are these reasonable for this $10 million plan, for this $20 million plan, for this $200 million plan? No matter what the plan size is, you're going to get questions about fees. And we've all seen in the last couple of years the huge uptick in litigation concerning retirement plans. According to a law firm, Groom Law Group in Washington, D.C., actually, in 2020 alone, there was an 80% spike in litigation related to retirement plans. Now, most of that had to do with excessive fees, whether it's record keeping, administration, or investments. But I find that very interesting. And that trend to me says that if larger and larger plans are starting to do this due diligence on their retirement plans, that can only mean one thing, that this litigation could very much well swim downstream to these smaller markets where you might see litigation with a $15 million plan over excessive fees. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for all things that could come us and our clients' way while we're fiduciaries on a retirement plan. And then also investment analysis and target date fund consulting is something that I know we all do. 85% of new assets are most likely going into target date funds as we continue to move through the 2020s here. And then lastly, courageous plan design and employee engagement. Employee engagement's an interesting one that I'm going to wrap up with today, but I think we have some really interesting facts and ideas on how you can drive engagement with your employees. But to kind of continue on here, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is kind of what's my duty with as being an advisor on this plan? Whether you're an individual wealth manager that's doing a client's 401k as a sign of good measure, or you're the retirement plan specialist with a couple hundred plans under your book of business. ERISA law says the same thing for everyone if you're a fiduciary on a retirement plan. Plan fiduciaries must act as prudent experts under ERISA and are therefore held to a high standard of care with respect to plan-related decisions. And that regards investments, service providers, administration, compliance. And so if you think about what we were just talking about, even though most 401k advisors look at themselves only from hey, where am I doing my investment due diligence? Am I doing any sort of fee benchmarking? The compliance and governance side of things is becoming more and more important. And it's all starting to kind of tie in together with servicing a retirement plan. So one of the things that I would really recommend to all of the folks that are on the call today is check in with your plans. Make sure that all of your plan sponsors are aware of their fiduciary duties. Now, I know a lot of great advisors on the call, like I saw here, are probably already doing that in the sense that they're making sure that their plan sponsors and their executive committees are aware of what kind of fiduciary liability awaits them as members of the executive committee there. And so moving forward here with, working with RPAG advisors and working with retirement advisors as a whole, one of the really interesting parts of my job and something that I feel really lucky to get to participate in is I get to work with retirement advisors from all over the country, from California to Connecticut. And it's very interesting to see how each of those different advisors interacts with their plans or even interacts with the practice management portal through RPAG. And a lot of times what we hear from advisors is, okay, I have this great tool set here that I can utilize to go prospect and keep my current clients happy. But how can I win new business? And as some anecdotal evidence from someone who's been working with advisors for the last 4.5 years, differentiators are the biggest piece to winning new business. Advisors that can go in front of plan sponsors and explain to them concisely and articulate how different they are from the competitors is how you win new business. So I pulled this slide up here. This is actually available through some of the RPAG resources found in the RPAG Resource Center. But think about your firm's value proposition. What is your firm great at? Is your firm a high touch point firm that does a lot with the individual participants of a plan? Are you high service? Are you going to make sure that every time a participant calls, they're going to get a live person to answer the participant helpline? Or are you one of those folks that has unlimited resources at your hands where you can pull in CFA charter holders, ERISA specialists, et cetera? Whatever is your firm's story is how you're going to want to position to win new business. And again, a lot of the most successful RPAG advisors that I work with over the last 2 years who have seen their practices grow exponentially, a lot of them are just great at differentiating themselves and saying, hey, we're coming in here and we know that, we have a different scoring methodology. We're going to benchmark your fees too, but hey, we're going to offer a financial wellness program that's going to blow every other financial wellness program out of the water. We're going to make sure all your participants are taken care of. And again, just another piece here, and I'll send this PowerPoint presentation along after the presentation here, but this slide here gives a quick overview of the fiduciary liability that's associated with board of directors, retirement plan committees, 401k plan participants. Now, again, I know a lot of the folks on this call are advisors, so you're probably well aware of this information, but it's always a good idea to possibly revisit it with some plan sponsors to remind them of what exactly they need to be doing to make sure that their 401k plan is running as smoothly as possible. So going forward here, the first piece I wanted to talk about is what should we look for with plans? You know, whether we're searching for Form 5500s, if we get our hands on some plan data, what are we kind of looking for here? So in terms of red flags on 5500s, our ERISA team put this together. And I think it's a great kind of guiding light for advisors who are kind of just starting in the prospecting process. A couple of different red flags to take a look at when you're researching 5500s. Now that could be through Larkspur or another database as well, but couple things to keep in mind. Number one is making sure that the participant deferral remittances are done as soon as administratively possible, which can be found in some of the attachments of the 5500. There needs to be an ERISA fidelity bond, which is not fiduciary insurance. Are there any loans in default, or have there been any corrective distributions made? All of these things are really important, and all of this is information that you can grab from a 5500. And if anyone is interested, I'd be happy to do one-on-one training on how to utilize Larkspur. Larkspur Executive is available to RPAG members, and it's a really powerful prospecting tool that we utilize to find new plans. So if anyone wants to have some one-on-one time after the fact, we can absolutely do that. And then, you know, moving forward and what we're looking for prospecting for new plans, one of the most powerful pieces of prospecting is what are you looking for? And so we looked at the Form 5500 red flags there, but there's a couple other things that you need to keep in mind when you're either analyzing your current client's fees or possibly a prospect's. So there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. One, what are the investment fees? What is the structure of the investment fees that this client is paying? Is this client in a really old 12B1 structured lineup where a lot of the revenue sharing is going directly back to the record keeper? What are the administrative fees? What is the client paying on an annual basis in terms of record keeping charges, trustee fees, compliance, custodians, things like that? And then lastly, I know this is all of our favorite conversation, what's the advisor getting paid and what services are being provided by that advisor? And so all of these things need to be taken into account when you're analyzing a plan to either prospect or play a little defense. And then a couple other things that you're going to want to look at. And these are, again, best practices that I've gathered from some of our more successful advisors. Plan financials, which is going to be, you know, your assets, your number of participants, cash flows, et cetera, your basic plan demographic information. Fund requirements, if there's any sort of proprietary funds in the plan that's using pricing levers, especially if you're looking at those cash equivalent funds, you know, what does their current fund lineup look like? Where are the assets lying? Are they all in the target date funds? Are they spread out? Do we have, you know, 15 different large cap value funds? Take a look at that investment lineup and see from your perspective what might look off to you. And then things like plan complexity with plan design or educational support and service requirements. All of these different pieces are going to go into finding the right provider and financial professional for a retirement plan. And again, it gets more and more complicated. We're not seeing this as much as we used to, but if you have multiple vendors that you're working with, maybe a record keeper, a TPA, and a custodian, that process is going to become more important to have a defined process to review all of this information and document it so that in case of an audit, if it ever comes down the pipeline, you have documented reasons on why you decided to pick this particular service provider or custodian. And then just a couple other plan and provider considerations here. Size and complexity service requirements. What's the provider's strengths? What are the provider system's capabilities? One of the interesting things that I get from conversations with advisors is that a lot of advisors are very quick to shovel business to a few favorite record keepers. And now most of the time that's a-okay because we are partnered with tons of record keepers that do great work in this industry. But take special consideration for what's important to your client. Are they looking for possibly more service? Well, then maybe one of the bigger record keepers isn't going to be a great fit for them. Maybe it's going to be a smaller regional record keeper that has a smaller book of business. Is it, is it a record keeper that works with the same plan size, or what kind of system capabilities do they have? Really take time to listen to your plan sponsor and gather that information, because it can be invaluable for you as you're kind of navigating the RFP process with your client. So getting into investment analysis and kind of how we look at investment analysis at RPAG and how our scoring system works and how we utilize it to win and retain business. A couple of things that are really important about our scoring methodology. And again, I know a lot of the folks here are familiar with it, but as a quick reminder, the RPAG scoring methodology is essentially, it's an institutional scoring methodology that's used to evaluate mutual funds, CITs, et cetera. And what we're really doing is we're marrying qualitative and quantitative factors into the evaluation process of these funds to do exactly what we see here on the screen. Enhance participant outcomes, make sure that we're giving them the best investments possible, manage risk so we know that those assets are safe going forward. And then lastly, and something that's becoming more and more prevalent today, is reducing fiduciary exposure. And for those of you folks who work with those really, really large plans, getting 50 million and up, reducing fiduciary exposure is going to be one of the more important pieces of what you and your plan sponsor are trying to accomplish. So again, 10-point scoring system, very easy to understand. And just a couple of things here. If you're an RPAG advisor, one of the things that a lot of our advisors do is position our scorecard methodology to show how valuable it really is. This scoring methodology is used on a couple $100 million plans to your $1 million plan. It's a defined, repeatable, and efficient process that you can use to evaluate mutual funds. And so just from looking at a client's a prospect's fund lineup, you can get a really quick look at, okay, how do they look in large cap value? Okay, they're scoring a 5 out of 10 there. That's not great. Maybe we need to swap funds out there. And we all know that when prospecting is that you take a look at the fund lineup and say, okay, what can we do to make this better? And so again, just a quick visual here on what we're kind of marrying to come up with our score in the RPAG scoring methodology. We're looking at style, risk return, peer group rankings, and then qualitative factors. Those qualitative factors are going to be things like manager tenure, strength of statistics, and expenses as well. So we're really looking at a very powerful, we kind of position it as an MRI machine, where you're running a plan through this MRI machine to see, hey, where's the problem areas at here? What hurts? It's not going to necessarily fix anything right away, but it's going to give you, the expert, or the doctor in this case, all the tools and information necessary to correct this issue for your plan sponsors. And one of the other things that I've seen a lot in the last year and a half or so with advisors having success winning new business is utilizing fund mapping and expense comparison reports. Really laying things out in as simple of terms as possible for plan sponsors. You can use fund mapping reports to show exactly to a prospect what your value is as an advisor. So for instance, if you're going in on a prospect here and you have access to their fund lineup and you see, okay, they're in this certain target date series and these certain investments. Well, if they came with us, we would go ahead and put them into this different share class and all these different investments. You can actually illustrate all of that information through RPAG or other practice management platforms and show the actual dollar and basis point savings that you're going to be providing to your plan sponsors. So I just took a snapshot here from RPAG of a fund mapping where we're showing we're moving from one provider to another. We're switching some share classes here. And a really important piece when you're going over this information is, where does revenue sharing play into all of this? Throughout the RFP and benchmarking processes, one of the most important things that we do is find out from the record keeper what happens with revenue sharing. Is it credited back to the participants? Is it maintained in an ERISA bucket? Is it retained by the provider, et cetera? And making sure that the client's aware of all of that as well. So through these fund mappings, you can not only show what different fund scenarios look like, but maybe you can restructure your revenue sharing to show, hey, if we credit this revenue sharing back to the plan here, this is actually what our savings are going to be. So there's a lot of interesting ways that you can illustrate savings through investment fees. And then real quick here, I touched on it lightly earlier, and something that I know we all look at quite a bit is target date fund evaluation. So through RPAG, there's a couple of different TDF analyzer resources, both just straight up analyzing different target date suites, as well as doing fit analyses for your plans. So again, target date funds might be a barrier of entry for you. Take a look at a prospect's target date funds and see, okay, why do we think they picked these funds? Ask the prospect why they picked those funds, and then figure out what's the most appropriate glide path for that plan. Is it going to be more of a moderate, aggressive, conservative, or maybe all three? So moving on from the kind of investment due diligence piece, getting to something that I'm very passionate about, working with plan fees a lot, is benchmarking fees and the RFP/benchmarking process. So this slide here is just a quick overview of kind of RPAG's RFP benchmarking process. So our RFP process, we utilize sometimes over 400 data points that looks at really every aspect of service, from a record keeper, a TPA, technology, communication, servicing, et cetera. The most important piece of illustrating plan costs is accuracy, and also what can we do to make this better? And so a couple of different things that I've seen a few advisors utilize in the past year or so. This slide here, I had an advisor utilize this with a plan, and I just thought it was very interesting and wanted to share it with you all folks. Is, some of you folks out there have a long-standing history with certain record keepers or providers. And so one way going into a prospect to kind of help win business, or maybe position your services over the current advisor services, is talking about, hey, you're currently with Principal Financial Group. Well, we have X amount of clients and X amount of $1 million with them. We have a dedicated relationship manager. Any piece that you can pick out from the plan's fact set to say, we can drill in here and make this a little bit better. So maybe a plan's having a tough time with a provider, but they don't necessarily want to move. Maybe you can reassure them that, hey, maybe your advisor's just not being proactive enough with the provider. We have Principal's ear because we have so much money with them, et cetera. So I just thought that was an interesting prospecting strategy that I hadn't really seen before, but has been successful for one of the advisors I work with pretty regularly. And so getting into kind of what's best practices for benchmarking, right? What kind of reports are we going to deliver? What's worth an advisor's time, and what's maybe a little bit too complex for maybe a prospect? And so through RPAG and plan fees, we actually have 3 different benchmarking and RFP offerings. The first being our classic plan fees Prism benchmarking, which is our annual fee comparison resource that compares the plan's current cost to a universe of similar plans to say, okay, this plan has a total cost of 100 basis points. Let's see how in line with that, with the other $5 million plans that is. So again, that fulfills that fiduciary duty that the ERISA community asks for of annual review of fee reasonableness. And then we also have an advisor fee benchmarking resource, which has been really interesting to see how our advisor community has put that into action over the past year or so as that's been rolled out. We've seen a lot of advisors utilize the Prism 365 advisor fee benchmarking report to do internal reviews of their own fees and service models. I'm trying to figure out, okay, we offer $5 million plans, an annual education meeting. Do we need to be offering more? We offer them semi-annual investment due diligence. Do we need to be offering more? Can we offer less? Can we charge more? Should we charge less? And even some advisors that I've worked with have proactively sent their clients Prism 365 reports to say, hey, we ran an independent benchmark of our plans. And this is where my advisor fees stack up. And then lastly, we have the old tried and true live bid RFP resource that everyone's very familiar with. Now, this is going to be your most complex report. This is what I think of RFP. I think about, shopping for things like car insurance, where you're saying, hey, I have car insurance with Nationwide. I'm going to go out to Geico and Progressive and get some quotes from them. And then I'm going to go back to my current car insurance provider and show them those quotes that we got to say, hey, we got quotes from your two biggest competitors. How about we lower these fees a little bit? And so it's all about knowing when to implement each of these. And so really what the idea behind plan fees and the RPAG resources are, the annual fee benchmarking, again, is going to be the plan fees prism. Only about 6 or 7 data points that are needed to run this report. Again, you can see it compares the current costs versus a low, average, and high of plans of similar size. And you can use this kind of as an internal resource or as a proactive resource with your clients to say, hey, here's where your fees, we did an annual benchmarking of your fees. Here's where you stack up. A lot of our advisors have successfully used this as a conversation starter. Maybe the investment fees are out of whack or the record keeping fees are too high. If you're only looking at total plan cost, you could be missing a huge piece of the story. Maybe the record keeping fee is a little low, but the investment fee is super high. And so it kind of cancels each other out. So again, just being aware of all these fees is the most important piece. And again, this is our advisor fee and service benchmarking report. This is where you can see how your services stack up versus your competition to see, hey, how often are these folks offering live bid RFPs? How often are we doing annual benchmarking, et cetera? And then lastly, I mentioned it a little bit, but the in-depth bid analysis. This is really what I see advisors doing for this is every 3 to 5 years to compare the current provider to some alternative providers in the industry, as well as on the onset of a new relationship. So it's simply too time consuming usually to run these for prospects, unless you're being paid some sort of project fee for maybe a larger plan. I've seen that done quite a bit. But the idea with this in-depth bid is that you're only doing this, again, every 3 to 5 years to make sure that you're getting the most competitive costs. And again, with the RPAG reporting I mentioned a little bit earlier, you have access to over 400 data points that have to do with service, record keeping, investment services, et cetera. So you have documentation on those fiduciary decisions so that, again, in case we ever get audited, we have all the firepower to back up why exactly we chose this particular provider. So sometimes, I get advisors who talk to me and say, hey, maybe all these 400 data points aren't important right now. Maybe we're going to use the shorter version of this. I always encourage folks to keep more information in their reports for documentation purposes to make sure that you have as much information as possible to document your fiduciary decisions. But again, all reports in RPAG are customizable. And so what I wanted to do next here was take a look at a quick case study that came across our desk. And real quick here, I've had a couple people email me. I will be sending the presentation out via email after this, so you will all have this in your hand. And then another question about getting data on the amount of assets with a particular provider. You can typically do that directly through something like RPAG. And Connor, if you have any questions about that, follow up with me directly afterwards here, and I'll be happy to show you exactly how you can pull that. But again, kind of getting back to our presentation here on, this case study that came across our desk. One of the advisors that I was working with a few months back was working on a prospect that had about $11.8 million plan, about 200 participants in it. And I walked through this process with this advisor to figure out, okay, how can we benchmark this plan? Where can we pinpoint the problem areas and what can we do? And so when working with this advisor, the first place we always start is the 5,500, right? It's publicly available information. Most of us have access to a 5,500 search database. And a lot of the information on the 5,500 is going to be accurate. Now, it might be a little bit out of date, depending on when they last filed, but there's a couple problems with the 5,500. Doesn't always include the investment lineup, which is tough, especially when you're trying to do investment analysis. The fees might not fully be disclosed, especially who's getting what fees. And there's also sometimes the audit attachments aren't all there. So what I would recommend for a prospect, if you're doing any sort of work for a prospect, is trying to get your hands on the 408B2 fee disclosure that's available from all record keepers. It is the best disclosure that shows where the participants are being charged and where that money goes. And so the 408B2 is great to figure out what is the record keeper keeping, what is the investment manager keeping, and then where does the advisor fee fit into all of that. So if you're not using the 408B2 to prospect, I would highly recommend doing that and working hand in hand with the prospect on that. So essentially, this advisor got their hands on the 408B2 and was able to run the fees through plan fees here. And one of the things that the advisor noticed here, you could see this is the plan in question here is in purple. Record keeping fee of about 82 basis points. Okay, that's pretty out of whack. Again, the plan fees prism shows low, average, and high here. And so we're looking at a range from anywhere between 24 and 59 basis points. So that caught the advisor's eye right away, 82 basis points for the record keeping charge. What also caught our eye here was that the investment lineup was only 15 basis points, which was lower than the low. And by the way, the low, average, and high actually represent the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles of this data universe that we're looking at. And so this caught the attention of the advisor to say, okay, we have really low investment costs, which probably means a lot of passive investments, probably a lot of index funds, et cetera, and really high record keeping charges. And for a person that's gone through quite a bit of RFPs, my red flag went off to say high record keeping charge, record keepers probably keeping a lot of the revenue sharing. So just from this quick report that took the advisor just a couple minutes to run, we had a very quick breakdown on what exactly was the problem area with the plan. And you can see if we were just looking at the total cost of the plan at the bottom here, the total cost is about 122 basis points. It's right around the average, between the average and the high here. So if we were only looking at plan costs, we'd say, okay, everything's fine here, moving on. But since we isolated these different cost components here, we can actually see, okay, the record keeping charge is what's out of whack. And again, making sure that you're comparing these as much as possible. And then once you've run an actual benchmarking and identified problem areas, right? So for this advisor that I was working with, one of the things that was really important to him was one quick question here that came up. How big is the universe of Prism 401k plans? Over 100,000 surveyed? Yes, I'll double check. I believe we have 70,000 plus plans in that Prism universe as of right now, and we're adding more every day. So it's a pretty robust universe for that plan fees universe there. And then lastly here, the advisor identified, hey, this record keeping charge is too much. He went back to the prospect and said, hey, here, I ran this benchmark report for you. Here was my findings. It looks like you're paying out the nose in record keeping costs and your investment lineup is incredibly cheap. And so what we might need to do is overhaul the investment lineup and find a new record keeper. And so that's when that advisor was actually hired by that prospect to do some project work and actually go out and get different bids from competing advisor or from competing providers as well. So you can see, we went over a lot of different fee benchmarking resources, but they all kind of tie in together, even though they have their individual uses and their own place. They can actually be all married pretty nicely to form a really robust RFP and fee benchmarking process. And then the last piece here is something that has been coming up quite a bit with advisors that I've talked to in the last year, especially when I got the chance to do a little traveling for the RPAG fall summits back in November. I had a lot of really interesting conversations with advisors on financial wellness. And I know it's a little bit of a buzzword right now in terms of our industry. But it was very interesting to talk to advisors and hear how many of them are now leading with financial wellness and leading with the fact that their financial wellness program makes them a key differentiator. And so here at RPAG, we have a couple of main ideas for employee engagement, offering a financial wellness program, giving those participants access to one-on-one meetings with financial wellness coaches or participant advice group sessions, things like that. And then also providing those participants and the plan sponsor a steady stream of content and material to educate them on whatever financial situation they're in. Now, again, this is something that's shouldn't be new to retirement advisors, right? Hopefully we all got into this to help navigate America to a successful retirement. But I found a couple of interesting stats from some of my colleagues here that I thought pretty interesting. Especially with quantifying the actual stress, the cost of stress on a business. So this is taken from a study from 2015. And essentially what it did was it used an algorithm to quantify how much revenue was lost on US businesses annually due to their employees being under financial stress. And so I just thought that, 300 billion, that number pops up a lot. And, I think a lot of us have been in a situation where we personally might have been facing difficult financial times. It can be something that's very, very, very overwhelming to do. And so with the way our industry is moving forward, as I mentioned earlier, with the retirement advisor becoming a more comprehensive business consultant, one of the things that you have to remember is that the retirement plan is part of the employee benefits package. The employee benefits package is designed to retain and keep employees happy. And so if your employee benefits package isn't helping your participants deal with financial stress, you're missing the boat. And so just a couple other statistics here. We saw 60% of 1,500 workers that were surveyed said that they were stressed out about their finances, and 70% of those folks said that they saw their stress level staying the same or increasing. So if you take a look from kind of the behavioral finance school of thought, that 60% number is alarming. I would say the 70% number is even more alarming, because of those 60% of people, 70% of those folks said, yeah, well, I don't see this getting any better anytime soon. And so for the employer that employs that participant, they're going to be losing money because that individual is stressed out. And so as an advisor, one of the big hallmarks of retaining business that I've seen is having a great financial wellness program. So I would encourage all of the advisors and the folks that are on this call to reevaluate your employee engagement process. Look at the efficiencies and the deficiencies in your current process and figure out how can we touch more participants? How can we be more efficient in interacting with those participants? And what can we do to help them? And so a couple different service solutions here for folks that I've seen in the past year. Offering group and individual education meetings, communicating with the employees as much as possible. RPAG folks on this call who utilize the fiduciary briefcase can tell you all about that, where you're just dropping things into the plan sponsor's fiduciary briefcase so that they have all their necessary documentation right at their fingertips. Asset allocation, financial planning, even something as simple as a bilingual consultant can really make a difference when you're approaching a prospect or servicing a current plan, and giving some of those participants who speak a different language the opportunity to get that employee engagement. And then lastly, classic education modules and employee memos, sending those little homework assignments out to your participants to say, hey, here's some information that'll help you out, help you get more organized in your finances. With financial wellness, the more you can get in front of participants, the more sticky that business becomes. Most individual participants of retirement plans don't know who their retirement advisor is. But if that retirement advisor, or at least someone from that firm, is getting in front of the participants, is being active in that participants community, is showing up for a group meeting to say, hey, we're advisor firm ABC, we're your retirement advisor, we're here to help you any way we can. Just those sort of things are so important to retaining business as well as approaching new plans as well. So the last piece I wanted to throw up here, especially for the RPAG members on the call, is if you haven't taken a look at the RPAG Resource Center in a while, I would suggest that you maybe revisit it, because we have added tons and tons of documents and refreshed some older presentations with newer branding. And so the RPAG Resource Center, I think, is your one-stop shop for your plan sponsor meetings. So whether you need a prospecting deck, you need an overview of services, you need consultant RFP answers, et cetera, all that can be found in the Resource Center in RPAG. And the last piece as well is that RPAG produces employee communication and employee education pieces for you. So on a monthly basis, RPAG produces a white labeled participant memo that you can feel free to send out to the participants of your plans. And we also produce some educational content, some flyers and one-pagers, as well as some presentation decks that you can utilize for group meetings or one-on-one meetings. So after going through all of that, I hope you all gained some interesting insights on how exactly to win and retain business going forward in this new year. So again, thank you very much, folks, for taking the time to join me today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly one-on-one, and good luck to you all in 2022. Thanks again.